Welcome back. In this video, I wanted to show you quickly how to structure your front-end projects. Having a strong project structure is very important. The reason it's very important is because when your application grows or when it scales, you want your application to scale smoothly. Having the incorrect structure will cause you a lot of problems and a lot of delays. A lot of the times people will end up refactor majority of the project in order to fit a certain scenario. So it's always good to think about the project structure before you even begin. So in this video, I'm going to show you just a simple example of how I structure my project, and you don't have to follow it like this 100%. A lot of people experiment with the different structures, and this is what you should be doing really. Okay, experiment until you find the right structure for you. So in here, as you can see, I created a project structure folder. So majority of the times when you're looking at a project, it always will have a source folder. This is the main folder where all of your code will live. Pretty much majority or all your code will live in here. I'm going to create a source. Another folder that you usually see, it is the public folder, which is outside the source. So in here, I am creating the public folder. Now the public folder will contain the main file, which is the index.html. So in here, I'm going to create index.html. Public folder can hold other things as well. It can hold favorite icon. It can hold translation in some cases. If you don't want to have a separate directory for translation, you can actually put it inside the public folder. You can have other things as well. Sometimes you can have other type of logos if you need them. We're not going to pay attention a lot to the public folder because it's very straightforward. Now inside the source, this is where all the magic happens. This is where you need to be careful. So in a normal React project, I usually have components folder, and inside that components I would have another folder. Let's say I'm working on a header component or working with a header component. So in here I would have, or call it head, and inside that head component I would have an index.js, and I would have another file, and that will be the head.jsx. So I'll tell you why I create an index.js. Having an index.js, it allows me to export or whatever I'm exporting from here. So in the head.jsx, I'll just create a simple sample component. So in here I'm going to use an extension I have, and in here I'm exporting the head component, and inside the index, now if I want to import this head component, I'm going to have to import it from basically source, components, head, and I'm going to have to repeat head here. And the reason is because I named this the same as the folder name, okay? But I don't want to have to write head again. So what I want to do is I want to be able to just do the following, and this is where the index.js comes in. So in the index.js comes in, I'm gonna say export default from head. So basically what this does is it takes whatever default export from the head component and re-exports it as a default from the index.js. So now if I wanted to import this head component in a different file or in a different script file, all I need to do is import it without having to duplicate the head file. And this is pretty much a simple structure which I follow. Another thing is, when working with tests and styles, if you think about it, years ago we used to have our own directories for tests, our own directories for styles, and so on. For front-end projects, especially right now when there's different frameworks and different things involved, it is good to keep everything within the same directory. Meaning now, if I want to write a test for the head component, all I need to do is write the test within the directory. So in here I could have head test.js or whatever really. You don't have to worry about the naming too much here, but it's good to give it a name related to what we're doing, or just even call it test.js. And the reason is, when you're opening the file, you want to be able to read it here. You want to be able to know what this file does just by reading the title. So as I said here, having the test within the same directory is very important, because as the project grows, it's kind of hard to figure out what test belongs to what component or what script, especially if we have a lot of components and a lot of scripts. So it is important to have things grouped together so we're able to match, okay, this test belongs to this component. This component is called head or belongs to this folder, and so on. Same with the styling as well. The styling, you want to keep it together with the component. So a lot of the times I'm working with Sass for styling, so I keep my Sass very related to the directory. So in here I would have head.csc, and basically in here I'm keeping everything related together. Now, if I wanted to have configuration file for, let's say, Sass or something like that, or a test setup file, then what I would do is I would have a folder in the source. So in here I would have test setup or something like that. Okay. In here I would have, if I wanted to have like mixins for Sass, if I wanted to have reusable components, something's different, you know. You need to experiment with this to figure out your the perfect structure that works for you. So in here I would have Sass, or majority of the times you'll see people call it styles. So you can call it styles, and in here I could have another folder, like call it mixins. I could have another folder, call it variables, and so on. Basically, this is the way I structure my projects. Now, when working with Redux, there is a very popular project structure that people follow. It's called container component structure. With that, you create another folder, call it containers or container. And in the containers, we would have basically everything related to the data and data manipulation and Redux related files such as Saga and so on. And basically the components directory becomes responsible only for presenting the data to the user. So this is also known as a presentational directory, or everything inside here is presentational components, and these are called containers components. So in here, what I would do is I would create another directory, call it head container. Basically, this is going to be related to the head component on the top. Okay, so in here, I'm going to do the same thing I did previously. So this will be responsible for connecting to Redux, getting all the props and all the dispatch properties from Redux, and basically passing it down to the head component. Okay, and the structure is pretty much the same. We would have an index.js, and in here we can export the head container, but we can also export other things if we need them somewhere else. And we would have a sagas or sagas.js. We could have constants if you want, or types or action types. We would have reducer.js, and basically everything related. Remember, this right here is responsible for fetching the data, manipulating the data, connecting to Redux, and passing everything down to this component, okay, the presentational component, to present it to the user. And this basically what allows you to do, it separates the logic from presenting the actual logic to the user. Okay, now this is very popular. If you look it up, presentational container components structure, I believe that's what it's called. I may be wrong, but it's very popular structure. And previously in the past, in my last company, I went ahead with this structure, and it was very, very good. I was able to build a project from scratch using this structure until finish. It was very good. I didn't get many problems. The structure was easy to follow, and it really, really helped me build the project without any problem. So this is one one way of building it. You probably also need to have, if you wanted to add tests, you can include your test here. Naming them, up to you. You can either name it using head container tests or head container sagas, head container reducer, or keep it as reducer.js. For me personally, I like to keep it as reducer.js, sagas.js, because I know when looking at it, I know it's under the head container. But the issue here, when someone opens it and they don't see the file structure on the left, or the project structure, if they just look at the file here on top, it's very hard to understand what file or what directory this file belongs to. So it is maybe a good example to actually name it head container reducer, head container sagas, head container tests, so that when it's opened here, you know, or other people know what directory this file belongs to. Now, as the project grows, your components and your containers will grow as well. So remember, you have your components, your containers, your styles, your tests. Now, another folder structure you would need is the assets. And the assets are pretty much images or anything related like that. So in the assets, I create another folder, call it images. I could have logos, which are different, really. What else? We could have anything that the site depends on. Okay. Another folder structure or directory that you would need is any utility files. So in here, it's usually called utils. Now, you could either call it utils or helpers. So I usually go for utils, and in here I would create, let's say, user.js. Okay, and in here I'll have a bunch of files or a bunch of scripts to do certain things for the user. Let's say authentication.js, and in here I could have login, logout, renew session, or anything related to the user, and so on. I would create a bunch of them whenever I need them, really. Sometimes if I don't have a big project, I wouldn't need this other directory, so I would have everything under utils, all the structure or the scripts under utils. So pretty much this is a very basic structure that you can follow. Your structure will not be 100% like my structure here. This is just to show you an example of how I usually go ahead and think about what my project needs and how I build the structure before I start developing. And obviously, mess around with it, play around with it. You don't have to follow it 100%. It's just a base from which you can build your project structure. Obviously, like, every person has a different approach and every person has a different preference. And so it's good to play around with different structures and see what works for you. But always remember to think about the structure before you start building, because once the project is halfway through, that's when you're going to experience problems if you need to refactor things. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again in the next video.